Elena Hayes watched the kitchen clock tick toward midnight, the hum of the refrigerator filling the too-quiet house. She hadn't touched the tea she'd poured an hour ago. It had gone cold on the counter, just like her marriage. The headlights, sweeping across the window, told her Nate was finally home. Her stomach twisted. She smoothed her pajama pants and waited. The door clicked open. "Hey," Nate said, dropping his keys into the bowl with a clatter louder than necessary. His hair was damp. He'd showered somewhere else. "You're late," Elena said, calm, controlled. She hated how natural the lie sounded coming from him. How, over the months, she'd learned the sound of deceit. Nate shrugged, avoiding her eyes. "Had to fix a problem at the office. Ran long." She said nothing. Watched him cross the room, watched his hands tremble slightly as he grabbed a beer from the fridge. Noticed the missing wedding ring. The silence between them was thick, filled, with all the words neither had said for weeks, months. Finally, she asked, "Who is she?" The beer bottle stopped midway to his mouth, a long, frozen beat. Then he set it down. His voice broke around the edges. "Elena, it's not what you think." "Lucky for you, Nate. I already know what it is." 3 weeks earlier, Elena had found the texts. She hadn't been snooping. Not really. His phone had lit up on the nightstand while he was in the shower. A name she didn't recognize. Rachel A. The messages weren't explicit, but the familiarity was enough. Jokes about last night, promises for next time. At first, she'd rationalized. An old friend, a work colleague. But then Nate started coming home later, started showering before he got back, started keeping his phone face down even during dinner. One night, when he'd claimed to be working late, she drove to his office. It was dark. From the parking lot. Across the street, she watched him leave the building, laughing with a woman half a step behind him. Younger. Pretty, in a careless way. They lingered by her car too long. His hand touched her back. Too familiar, too casual. And then they kissed. The world had tilted. Elena stayed long enough to memorize the woman's license plate. The next morning, she called her old friend Lucas, a private investigator. "You sure you want to know everything?" he'd asked. Elena wasn't sure, but she said yes. Now, in the kitchen, Nate dragged a hand through his hair. "It was nothing serious." Elena let out a bitter laugh. "Nothing serious, that's comforting. I swear to God, it's over. It was a mistake, like a wrong turn, a typo, not the months-long deception he had cultivated with deliberate care. You could have told me," she said. "We could have—" She trailed off, worked through the sentence in her mind. We could have what? Worked through it? Pretended? Forgiven? He shook his head. "I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the second you decided to lie." He came closer, voice raw. "I still love you." Elena felt the truth of it, and how hollow it was. Love wasn't enough if it was built on splintered trust. She thought about Lucas, who had dropped off a manila folder 2 days ago, thick with photos, bank statements, hotel receipts. About the second woman's name he'd circled. About the possibility that this wasn't Nate's first mistake. She hadn't shown Nate the folder yet. It sat in her dresser drawer, a cancer waiting to metastasize. The front doorbell rang. Both of them startled. It was almost midnight. Nate frowned. "Who the hell?" Elena already knew. She moved past him to the door. It was Rachel, younger up close, nervous. Wearing a denim jacket, her hands clutched into fists. Her eyes, wide, darting, landed on Nate. "You told me you weren't married," Rachel said. Her voice cracked. "You said it was over." Elena felt a quiet satisfaction in the way Nate flinched, in the sudden brutal exposure. "You should go," Elena said calmly to Rachel. "You're not the villain here, just—" Collateral damage. Rachel looked between them, panicked before hurrying away. Nate closed the door heavily. His face was pale, broken. "I can fix this," he said, almost to himself. Elena studied him. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew, was standing there, crumbling. And still, some stupid, aching part of her wanted to reach for him, wanted to believe it, but trust was a shattered mirror. Even if you picked up all the pieces, you'd still bleed when you touched it. "I don't know if I want it fixed," she said quietly. Later that night, Nate slept fitfully on the couch. Elena lay awake in their bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow, broken rhythm of his breathing. She thought about revenge, about calling Rachel back, about sending the evidence to Nate's boss, about burning it all down. She thought about forgiveness, real, hard forgiveness, the kind that gutted you before it healed you. Neither seemed right, neither seemed enough. At 3 a.m., she got up, opened the dresser, pulled out the folder. She carried it downstairs, set it on the coffee table near Nate's head. Watched him for a long moment. The man who had been her best friend, her family, her home. She left the house as the first pale light of dawn broke over the rooftops. Elena drove without knowing where she was going. The early morning streets were empty, washed in the sickly yellow of streetlights. She turned instinctively toward the lake, a place that had always calmed her. She sat on a bench overlooking the dark, trembling water. The folder still burned in her mind. It wasn't just infidelity, it was the money transfers. The second woman, a pattern of betrayal, sprawling like cracks in ice. Her phone buzzed, a text from Lucas. "Lucas, found something else. You need to see this. It's bigger than we thought." Bigger. Elena's hands tightened on the phone. She hesitated, then texted, back. "Where?" "Lucas, coffee shop, 30 minutes. The coffee shop was just opening. Elena and Lucas sat in a booth by the window, steaming mugs between them. Lucas looked exhausted, his stubble rough, his eyes bloodshot. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "Tell me," she said. He slid a new folder across the table. Inside, bank statements, emails, legal notices. It wasn't just affairs. Nate had been embezzling from his company, quietly shifting money, through shell accounts, falsifying invoices, millions. "You blow this up," Lucas said, voice low. "He's not just losing his job, he's going to prison." Elena's mind reeled. All those late nights, all those broken promises. It hadn't just been about lust. It had been about greed, survival, desperation. She remembered their arguments about money, the way Nate would bristle when she asked about their dwindling savings. "You think the company knows?" she asked. "Maybe," Lucas said. "But they haven't moved yet. Might be trying to build a case first." A hollow laugh escaped her lips. They weren't the only ones building a case. "You could walk away," Lucas said. "No blood on your hands." Or, he let the word hang, or she could destroy him. Elena drove back to the house, her mind a whirlwind. The sun was fully up now, casting harsh light over everything, as if nothing had changed, as if everything hadn't. She found Nate awake, sitting at the kitchen table, the folder she'd left open before him. His face was blank, his eyes red-rimmed. "You were going to leave," he said. Not a question. "I don't know what I was going to do," Elena said truthfully. He nodded, almost grateful for the honesty. "You found everything?" "Almost everything." Nate's jaw tightened. He rubbed his hands together like he could scrub the guilt off his skin. "I was trying to fix it. Get the money back before anyone noticed. Rachel, she wasn't supposed to matter. None of them were." Elena crossed her arms. "But they did." He dropped his head into his hands. "I never wanted to hurt you." "You didn't want to get caught," she corrected. A long silence stretched between them. A chasm. Finally, Nate looked up. His voice was almost a whisper. "What happens now?" Elena stared at him. She thought about the years they'd built together, the memories woven into every room of this house. She thought about the lies layered under each one like rot. She could call the police, end this, or she could walk away. Let Nate face whatever was coming without her help or her hand, or she could stay, try to rebuild, try to forgive. Each path glittered with broken glass. "I don't know," she said, and for once, it was the only honest answer. Later, Elena packed a bag, just the essentials. She left the house without saying goodbye. She didn't go to her sister's or a friend's. Instead, she checked into a small motel off the highway, somewhere anonymous. She needed time. Space. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting the world in molten gold, beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. She sat on the motel bed, the folder on, the nightstand. A thin line of choice stretching before her, forgiveness, revenge, freedom. Maybe tomorrow she'd decide. For tonight, she simply let herself exist, raw and uncertain, in the ruins of what had once been a life. 3 days passed. Elena stayed in the small motel room, drifting between restless sleep and long, silent hours of thought. She kept her phone on silent, though it buzzed sometimes, calls from Nate, a few texts from Lucas. She read none of them on. The 4th day, she went home, not because she wanted to, but because some things had to be faced. The house smelled stale, the way it always did when no one had opened a window for too long. Nate was gone. On the kitchen table sat a single sheet of paper, weighted down by his wedding ring. Her hands shook as she picked it up. "Elena, I'm sorry. I don't know how to make this right. I wish I could undo it all. I wish I deserved your forgiveness. I'm turning myself in. I hope someday you'll find peace, even if it's not with me. Nate." She stared at the note for a long time. The weight of it settled heavily into her bones. It made sense, in a way. Nate had always been impulsive under pressure, trying to outrun guilt the way he once tried to outrun bills and obligations. But this time, he wasn't running. Or maybe he was, just in a different direction. Elena sat down heavily in the kitchen chair, looking around the room. The old water stain on the ceiling, the scuffed cabinets, the life they had built piece by flawed piece. Her phone buzzed again. "Lucas," she answered this time. "You heard?" he asked. His voice was cautious. "Careful." "I'm home," she said simply. "He left a note." "Yeah. He turned himself in an hour ago. His lawyer's already spinning it, making it look like some kind of desperate mistake instead of a long con." Lucas hesitated. It could work. He might get a reduced sentence. Elena closed her eyes. A part of her felt lighter, freer. Another part felt unbearably hollow. "What about the women?" she asked. Lucas paused. "Rachel made a statement. So did one other. But it's not a criminal case on that front. Just damage. Damage." The word was too small, too neat, too. Weeks later, Elena sat in the courthouse gallery, hidden among strangers. Nate wore a gray suit that hung loose on his frame. His hair was too short, as if he had tried to shed his old self along with his crimes. He didn't see her. Or maybe he did, but pretended not to. He pled guilty. Voice steady, face drained of color. Elena watched, heart pounding dully. She thought about the man she had married, about the thousands of tiny, invisible choices that had led them here. The judge set sentencing for next month. As the crowd filed out, Nate finally lifted his eyes, and for a moment, they locked. He looked wrecked, broken in a way that went deeper than guilt, and for just a moment, Elena thought, maybe there is still a piece of him that loved me. Maybe that piece is all that's left. She turned away before he could see her cry. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air was crisp and thin. Elena didn't know what came next. Maybe she'd sell the house. Maybe she'd move to the coast. Like she'd dreamed about before life became small and tangled. Maybe she'd stay here a while longer, stubborn, surviving, stubbornly alive. Forgiveness wasn't a door she could just walk through. It was a long, brutal road, one she would have to walk alone, at least for now. She got in her car, started the engine, and pulled away. In the rearview mirror, the courthouse grew smaller and smaller until it was just another building, just another place she'd been. Ahead, the highway stretched out under a pale blue sky, open, unfinished, just like her. End of part 3. The motel was gone. When Elena returned to the city a week later, she found a for sale sign planted in the motel's weedy lot. Maybe it was fitting. Nothing stayed still forever. She rented a small apartment near the river, a tiny second-floor walk-up with creaky floors and a dented mailbox. It was nothing like the house she had shared with Nate. That was part of why she chose it. The first night there, she slept on the floor, wrapped in a quilt she'd dragged from the trunk of her car. She stared at the cracked ceiling, listening to the occasional rumble of a passing bus. It wasn't much. It was hers. 5th. Lucas showed up a few days later, carrying 2 greasy bags of takeout and a bottle of cheap wine. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "You're not exactly a ray of sunshine yourself," Elena shot back. But she smiled a little, the first real one in weeks. They ate on the floor, passing the wine bottle back and forth. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found out?" Lucas asked finally. "All the time," Elena said. "I would have stayed. I would have kept trying, believing. I think part of me always knew." "That's not your fault." "I know," she said, and meant it, mostly. Lucas leaned back against the wall, his expression unreadable. "You ever think about what's next?" Elena thought about it. Really thought. "I don't know," she said again. "But this time I'm not going to build my life around someone else's lies." Lucas raised the bottle in a silent toast. She clinked it with hers. Thanks. The sentencing came and went without her. Nate received 4 years, eligible for parole in 2. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of trust. The newspapers wrote short, ugly articles that spelled his name wrong half the time. Elena didn't visit. She didn't send a letter. Sometimes she wondered if Nate expected her to. If he sat in his cell at night, waiting for the sound of her forgiveness, the way he once waited for the garage door to lift, maybe he didn't. Maybe he understood that some things were beyond fixing. Some things stayed broken. Spring came slowly. That year, Elena started working part-time at a local library, shelving books, running children's story time, breathing in the dusty, comforting smell of paper and ink. She planted herbs in mismatched pots on her windowsill, basil, thyme, rosemary. Watched them grow. Watched herself heal, inch by stubborn inch. Lucas dropped by sometimes, never stayed too long. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. There were moments, small and sharp, when Elena caught the way he looked at her. Not with pity, but with something quieter, sadder, maybe even hope. She wasn't ready for that, not yet, maybe not ever, but she didn't shut the door either. 18. One evening, almost a year after it all shattered, Elena found herself standing on a small pedestrian bridge over the river. The water rushed beneath her in endless, restless motion. She thought about Nate, about the life they had almost had, She thought about who she was before and who she might be now. She took a small, battered coin from her pocket, one she'd kept since college, a stupid lucky charm she used to believe in. She kissed it once, softly, and tossed it into the river. The current swallowed it whole. Elena stood there a long time, the wind lifting her hair, the last light of sunset setting, the sky on fire. She didn't wish for anything. The invitation came in a plain envelope, tucked between bills and catalogs. Elena almost threw it away without opening it. But something about the handwriting, the tight, slanted script, made her pause. Inside, an announcement. Rachel Bennett and Lucas Hart invite you to celebrate their marriage Saturday, October 14th. Elena sat very still at the kitchen counter, the world narrowing to a pinpoint around her. Rachel. Lucas. 1,000 tangled feelings rose up. Confusion, betrayal, something sharper and sadder she couldn't quite name. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat with it for a long time, watching the steam curl up, vanish into nothing. She didn't go to the wedding. She sent a small, polite card instead, wishing them happiness, meaning it in some fractured way. Some doors, once closed, stayed closed, and some wounds, while healed, left permanent scars. Elena had learned to live with both. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She managed the library now, a quiet little empire of dusty shelves and whispered secrets. She'd started teaching creative writing classes at night, something she'd once dreamed of when she was young enough to believe anything was possible. She dated sometimes, cautiously, quietly. No grand romances, no promises she didn't believe. And she had friends now, real ones, not just the glossy couples they used to double date with. Friends who knew her history and didn't flinch away from it. Her apartment was bigger. She had a dog, a lopsided rescue mutt named June. Most days, she woke up without thinking about Nate at all. Some nights, when the rain tapped against the windows and the world seemed impossibly vast, she still dreamed of him, or maybe just of who she had been before everything broke. Once, in the frozen aisle of the grocery store, she thought she saw him, a man, head down, a basket in his hand, the same familiar slump to his shoulders. Her heart hammered in her chest. But when he turned, it wasn't Nate. Just a stranger with the wrong kind of sadness in his eyes. She left her cart behind and walked out into the biting winter air, breathing hard, feeling ridiculous and alive, still alive. On the 5th anniversary of the day she left the house, the real day her old life ended, Elena drove to the river. The bridge was the same. The river rushed below, patient and wild. She leaned over the railing, letting the cold air whip at her hair and skin. She didn't bring anything to throw this time. No coins, no tokens. She had nothing left to give away. Instead, she whispered something into the water. Not a wish, not a prayer, just a thank you. For surviving, for changing, for beginning again. The river carried her words away, lost in the endless motion. Elena turned and walked back to her car. She didn't look back. End of epilogue. Full series complete. Final notes. Elena grows, but never forgets. The past shapes her without defining her. Lucas's choice to marry Rachel hints at his own complicated journey and reminds us that betrayal isn't always simple. The story remains grounded. No fairy tale fix, just real strength built out of surviving heartbreak. The letter arrived in early spring, tucked into a stack of junk mail. No return address. The handwriting was careful but shaky, as if whoever wrote it had to think about each letter before setting it down. Elena almost didn't open it. But something inside her, some stubborn shard of unfinished business, wouldn't let her throw it away unread. She sat on the couch with June snoring at her feet and unfolded the single page. Elena, If you're reading this, I guess you haven't changed addresses. I didn't know if I should write. I didn't think I deserved to. Maybe I still don't. I'm getting out soon. Early release for good behavior. There's no excuse for what I did. No way to make it clean. I spent a long time thinking about how many ways I betrayed you. Not just the money, not just the lies. It's how I let you believe you were the crazy one when you were the only one trying to save us. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I hope you found peace. I hope you're happy. Nate Elena sat for a long time after reading it, the paper trembling in her hands. Not from anger, not from grief, but from something quieter, sadder. Nate wasn't asking for anything, not a second chance, not even absolution. Just a moment of being seen, one last time. Bo. She thought about writing back, a simple note maybe. I'm okay. I hope you are too. But in the end, she didn't. Some stories didn't need new chapters. Some goodbyes had to stay final. 6. That night, Elena stood by the window, watching the rain blur the city into watercolor streaks. She wasn't the girl who had begged for answers, for loyalty, for love that could survive betrayal. She wasn't the woman who had packed a bag in the dark and driven toward a future she couldn't see. She was something new, not whole, because nobody was ever whole after being broken, but strong in the places where she had once been shattered. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of her own heart. Outside, the rain kept falling, cleansing, soft, endless. Inside, Elena closed her eyes and smiled, small, private, fierce. The past was a river she had crossed. She wasn't going back. She told herself she wasn't going to do it. She told herself she had nothing to say. But 3 days after the letter, Elena found herself driving west, past the cracked sidewalks and tired strip malls, toward the low-slung halfway house on the edge of the city. Nate was waiting outside. He looked smaller, older. His face was thinner, like the prison years had carved him down to essentials. He wore a plain jacket, hands shoved deep in the pockets. When he saw her car pull in, he stood, up straighter, uncertainty flickering across his face. She parked, cut the engine. For a moment, she just sat there gripping the wheel. Then she got out. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence was heavy but not angry, just full of all the things words could never reach. Finally, Nate said, I didn't think you'd come. Elena crossed her arms over her chest, not from anger, from the sheer weight of it all. I almost didn't. He nodded, swallowing hard. You look good. I'm happy, she said. It wasn't said to punish him. It was just the truth. Something in Nate's face cracked a little. But he smiled anyway, a real, broken, grateful smile. I'm glad, he said, his voice roughened. God, Elena, you deserved so much better than me. Maybe, she said. But I deserved the truth, too. He lowered his eyes. I know. For a long time they stood there, the cold spring wind threading between them. Finally, Elena said, You don't need to keep carrying me around with you. Let me go, Nate. He looked up, something, raw and boyish, flashing across his face. I'm trying. You will, she said. You have to. He nodded, wiped at his eyes roughly with the back of his sleeve. They weren't lovers anymore. They weren't enemies either. They were just two people standing in the aftermath of everything they'd destroyed. And somehow, strangely, that felt enough. She didn't hug him. She didn't say goodbye. She just turned, got back in her car, and drove away, the rearview mirror catching the image of Nate standing alone in the fading afternoon light. This time, she didn't look back, not even once. alternate ending complete. Reflections on this version. Elena keeps her dignity while acknowledging the real, messy human bond they once had. Nate shows true remorse, but redemption is his own burden, not something she owes him. Closure doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from choosing to walk forward. If you want, I can also offer a very short Lucas's POV vignette, showing his regrets later, a future Elena snapshot 10 years ahead where she fully thrives, or even a mini side story about Rachel, the woman Nate betrayed too. 10 years. Some days Elena could hardly believe it had been that long. Other days it felt like another lifetime entirely, like she was remembering someone else's story, someone else's heartbreak. She stood in the kitchen of her small, sunlit house, her house, hands dusted with flour, a pie baking in the oven, music humming low from the old radio perched on the counter. June was gone now. She'd passed 2 summers ago. But a new dog, a scrappy brown terrier named Finn, was dozing at her feet, twitching in his sleep. The windows were open. The world outside was green and gold, full of warmth. Elena moved through her home with easy confidence. Books lined the walls. Paintings she'd collected from local artists filled the spaces between. A life built one careful piece at a time. No one saved her. No one rescued her. She rescued herself. Sometimes people asked if she was married. If she had children, she didn't. She had people, friends, chosen family, a few quiet loves along the way. But marriage had never tempted her again, not because she was afraid. Not anymore. But because she had learned something precious. She didn't need to be claimed to be whole. One afternoon, sorting through old boxes, she found a photograph she didn't remember keeping. She sat down on the worn wooden floor, legs crossed, the photo resting on her palm. It was her and Nate, young, bright-eyed, laughing in some distant summer she could no longer name. For a moment, grief stabbed at her, sharp, sudden. But then it softened. She smiled. Real, steady. That. Girl had loved hard, had trusted, had hoped. She wasn't foolish. She was brave. And the woman she had become, forged in the fire of betrayal and rebuilt from the ash, carried her with pride. Later, as evening fell, Elena took a walk through the little town she called home. The river nearby shone in the dying light, the water catching the last gold of the day. She stood on the bridge for a long time, breathing in the scent of rain and earth, feeling the pulse of life all around her. She thought, briefly, of Nate, of Lucas, of all the people she had once loved and lost. Then she thought of herself, the survivor, the builder, the woman who had chosen herself, again and again. She closed her eyes, feeling the wind lift her hair, cool against her skin. When she opened them again, the world was still there, wide and wild and waiting, and so was she. The distance between us won. The first message came on a Wednesday, a simple text from an unknown number. You don't know me, but you should know about Adam. Claire Benton sat at her desk, the office lights cold and sterile above her, staring at the glowing screen until the words blurred. She almost deleted it. Almost pretended it was a scam, a prank. Almost. Instead, with hands she didn't quite trust, she typed back, "What about him?" The reply came fast, merciless. "He's been lying to you. Meet me if you want the truth." Claire sat very still, the hum of computers and conversations around her fading to a dull roar. Outside, the winter rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. She tucked the phone into her bag, stood, walked out of the office without a word. The truth. God help her. She was still stupid enough to want it. Adam Benton was the kind of man people trusted on sight. Clean-cut, steady, the sort of guy who volunteered to coach Little League even though they didn't have kids yet. Claire had loved that about him. She had loved him for the easy way he smiled at strangers, the way he made the world seem just a little more manageable. Now she wasn't sure if that smile had been a weapon all along. The meeting place was a coffee shop 2 neighborhoods over, unfamiliar, anonymous. Claire sat by the window, clutching a cup she didn't want, her heart battering itself against her ribs. At 5:17 p.m., a woman slid into the seat across from her, blonde hair, dark circles under her eyes, a black coat that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. "I'm Megan," she said. No hello, no smile. Claire nodded, feeling like she was watching herself from far away. Megan didn't waste time. "I'm Adam's other wife," she said. The world didn't tilt or explode or freeze, it just narrowed. Claire blinked. "What?" Megan pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a marriage license. Adam's name, Megan's name, dated 4 years ago. Claire felt her body go cold, numb. 4 years, that would make it 2 years before their own wedding. Her mouth was dry. This has to be a mistake." Megan's face softened just a little. "I thought so too, at first." She pushed more papers across the table. Photos, financial statements, text messages. Proof. Claire stared at them without seeing, her mind trying to jam the pieces into a picture that made sense. It wouldn't. It never would. Later that night, Claire sat alone in the darkened kitchen, the city lights bleeding through the windows like bruises. Adam wasn't home yet. He thought he was walking back into the same life he'd left that morning. Wife, house, routines. Claire let the clock tick on. Tick, tick, tick. She could destroy him. She could tear down the whole life he'd built out of lies, or she could leave. Quietly. Without giving him the satisfaction of seeing her break. The choice was hers. For the first time in months, maybe years, she realized, he didn't own her pain. He didn't get to decide who she became. When Adam walked through the door, whistling tunelessly, setting down his keys, Claire was waiting, not with tears, not with rage, just with the truth, laid out, plain and sharp and inescapable between them. She watched the color drain from his face, watched him stammer and lie and beg, watched herself, calm, cold, unbreakable, rise from the ruins. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "I don't need to hear your excuses," she said. "I don't need anything from you at all." And she walked past him, out the door, into the rain-slicked night, into her new life, into her freedom, without once looking back. Claire stood at the window of her apartment, looking out at the rain-slicked streets below. It was a small, quiet place, far from the life she had shared with Adam. The apartment felt like a sanctuary, even if it was still filled with boxes, half unpacked. It had taken months to begin to fill the empty spaces. New books, a painting she'd bought from a local artist, a set of mismatched plates she didn't mind breaking. She'd found herself again in the mundane, in the small, simple acts of rebuilding. Sometimes she still woke in the middle of the night, her heart hammering as the weight of the past pressed down on her. But then she'd breathe, ground herself in the present, remind herself this was her life now. Megan had come to visit last week, bringing takeout and an awkward but heartfelt apology. They'd sat in the kitchen, sipping wine, talking about the mess they'd both inherited. Megan's life hadn't turned out the way she'd imagined either. She'd filed for divorce from Adam almost immediately, but she was still processing what it had meant to be someone else's secret for so long. "I'm trying to build something for myself," Megan had said, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, but I don't want to be defined by him anymore." Claire had nodded, understanding that feeling all too well. There was no clean slate. There was only moving forward, one step at a time. She could forgive Megan. She had to. But she couldn't forget. Adam had called once, a month ago. The voicemail was full of self-pity, regret, and a plea for a second chance. "I know I've ruined everything," he had said, his voice breaking. "But Claire, please, I want to make it right. I need you. We can fix this. We've been through worse, haven't we?" She'd deleted it without listening to the rest. Claire wasn't sure if it was the betrayal that had broken her trust or the arrogance he still carried. The idea that he could just fix things, as if his mistakes could be mended with a conversation and a few tears. Some things didn't deserve to be fixed. The next day, Claire met with her lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. It wasn't something she had wanted. It was something that had become inevitable. But when the papers were signed, when the last of the formalities were done, Claire felt lighter. She'd shed a skin. She wasn't the woman who had been blind to her own worth. She wasn't the woman who had waited for someone else to save her, and when she left the lawyer's office, she didn't look back. One Saturday, months later, Megan reached out again. She was in town just passing through. They met for coffee at a quiet cafe near the park. Megan was different now, her hair shorter, her smile tentative but genuine. The anger was gone, replaced by something softer. "I'm trying," Megan said, stirring her coffee slowly. "I think I'm getting there, but I don't know what that means anymore." Claire smiled for the first time in a long while. "I think you're on the right path." They sat in silence for a moment, two women who had been tied together by a man's lies, now sharing a table as strangers with shared experiences. Maybe someday they could be friends, maybe not. But they had both learned something important, that sometimes healing meant walking away from the ghosts of the past. Claire's life wasn't perfect. There were days when she missed the simplicity of the life she'd once had with Adam, before everything had gone wrong. But she was finding peace in the quiet moments. The scent of fresh coffee in the mornings. The soft hum of her favorite music filling the apartment. The freedom to choose her own direction. And slowly she was learning to trust again, not just others, but herself. Her heart had been shattered, yes, but it was still whole enough to love again. Not in the way she had loved Adam. No, that had been something different, something she couldn't ever go back to. But there was a future now, a future she was making, piece by piece. And then one evening, as Claire was walking through the park near her apartment, she saw a man sitting alone on a bench. It wasn't Adam, but it might as well have been. He was reading a book, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose, his face soft with concentration. Claire walked past him, her footsteps slow but steady. For a moment, she wondered what it would be like to sit down beside him, to talk, to share the easy, mundane parts of life with someone new. But she didn't. Not yet. Not now. She wasn't ready. Not for that. Not for a new beginning with someone else's hands in hers. But she wasn't afraid of it either. The future was still, wide open, filled with light and shadow and everything in between, and for the first time, she was ready to embrace it. End of epilogue. Final reflections. Claire is no longer defined by the betrayal, but by her resilience. Megan and Claire's connection is built on shared understanding, though not necessarily a deep friendship yet. Adam is left behind, his calls unanswered. He can no longer define their futures. Claire's future is open, filled with potential, but without the need for a new relationship. She's learned to trust herself again, which is the foundation for everything else. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows over the small park where Claire sat on a bench, a book open in her lap. She hadn't planned on staying here for so long, but the quiet solitude had a way of pulling her in. The calm, the fresh air, the rhythm of her own thoughts. Life had been full of changes since the end of everything with Adam, since that cold, rainy night when she'd walked away. Now her world was different. She'd learned to make peace with the pieces of herself she thought were lost. Claire ran her fingers along the cover of the book she was reading. It wasn't anything profound, just a novel, a little escape. But it was hers, this moment of silence, of stillness. Her phone buzzed in her bag and she pulled it out absent-mindedly. "How about dinner tonight? Your place?" It was from Rachel. Claire smiled. She hadn't heard from Rachel in a while, but their friendship had deepened over the years. Rachel had come into Claire's life at a time when Claire needed someone who understood the weight of solitude, someone who knew how to hold space for the unspoken things. Rachel had been the first person to truly witness her healing, the quiet, painful process of rebuilding after betrayal. "Sounds perfect. See you at 7? "Absolutely." She tucked the phone back into her bag, feeling a deep sense of calm settle over her. As she closed the book, Claire looked out at the park. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden light across the grass. She thought of how she used to walk here with Adam, how their conversations had once been full of promises she never got to keep, but now everything felt quieter, and she liked it that way. She had learned to let go of the what-ifs. The idea of Adam and their lost life together was a distant echo now, fading at the edges of her mind. She had forgiven him, in her own way, but she had never once returned to the girl she was when they were together. That version of her had been fragile, trusting, naive. This new version of herself was stronger, more aware. She had let go of the anger, the resentment. The pain no longer had a grip on her, but neither did the yearning for the life they had planned. Claire wasn't the only one who had changed. Megan, too, had found her own path. After the divorce from Adam, Megan had moved to a different city, taken a job that paid her well, but gave her more room for the life she hadn't expected. She had enrolled in therapy, had started finding her voice again. Megan had her own small apartment now, a new routine, new friends. They still spoke occasionally, though it was mostly light-hearted now. Megan had learned to accept that the past couldn't be erased, but it also didn't have to define her. Sometimes Claire wondered if their paths would have crossed differently had they not shared the same painful experience. Perhaps they would have been friends or maybe strangers, but now they were something in between, distant, but not unkind. Rachel arrived at Claire's apartment right on time, bringing a bottle of wine and a loaf of bread she had baked herself. They shared a quiet dinner, the conversation flowing easily between them, just like old friends should. The light around them softened as the evening wore on, and the space felt full of warmth and understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. "How's the new project at work?" Rachel asked as she sipped her wine. "Good," Claire replied, her eyes sparkling with the same quiet confidence that had grown in her over the past few years. "I'm leading a team now. It's a little overwhelming, but I'm figuring it out." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Look at you, boss lady," Claire laughed softly. "I didn't think I'd be here, but yeah, it's been a surprising year." Rachel smiled knowingly. "Surprising, but not impossible. You've always had that in you, Claire." They fell into a comfortable silence. There was no need to explain what had happened or how far they had come. The past was woven into the present, but it no longer defined them. Later, as the evening stretched into night, Rachel offered to stay the night, but Claire was already feeling the pull of solitude again. "Thank you," Claire said, standing to see Rachel off. "But I think I need some time alone tonight. Just me and my thoughts." "Of course," Rachel said with a smile, giving her friend a warm hug. "I'm just a phone call away, you know that." "I do," Claire said, feeling a weight lift off her chest. I really do. 8. After Rachel left, Claire sat on the couch for a while, her eyes scanning the room. The apartment felt like a reflection of her own journey, imperfect, unfinished, but full of possibility. She had done the work. She had faced the darkness, the betrayal, the lies, and she had come through the other side, a little scarred, yes, but stronger for it. Tomorrow would be another day. Maybe it would bring challenges, maybe it wouldn't. But Claire was no longer afraid. She had learned that life was never just about surviving the storm. It was about finding peace in the quiet after. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Claire smiled to herself. She was ready for whatever the future might bring, not because she was certain of it, but because she had finally learned to trust herself. The distance between her and the woman she had been seemed vast now, and yet, the lessons of the past still shaped her. They always would. But she wasn't the same person who had walked away from Adam. No, she was someone new. Someone who had learned that peace, true peace, could only come from within. And that was enough. End of flash-forward final reflections. On this ending, Claire has found peace. Not because the past is forgotten, but because it's been integrated into her present. The relationships with others have evolved into new forms, including Megan, who is healing in her own way, and Rachel, who has become a pillar in Claire's life. Claire's professional growth shows that she's rebuilt herself in all areas, not just emotionally. She's now a leader at work. The quiet strength of the ending reflects her transformation, a woman who has learned to embrace her independence and move forward with clarity. It was a crisp Sunday morning when Claire met him. The small farmer's market downtown was alive with the colors of fresh produce, homemade jams, and the warm scent of bread baking in an old oven. It wasn't a place she usually came to on her own. But today, she wanted to walk, to feel the sun on her face even if it was still cold, to breathe in the possibility of something new. She wasn't looking for anything, not really, but sometimes life had a funny way of surprising you. She had just picked up a bunch of wildflowers when a voice caught her attention. "You know, those are my favorites." Claire turned, startled by the unexpected words. He stood a few feet away, a warm smile on his face. His hair was dark and a little tousled, his hands in the pockets of a well-worn jacket. He looked real. Not polished, not perfect, just someone who seemed comfortable in their own skin. He was a stranger. And yet, in that moment, she wasn't afraid. "Really?" Claire asked, raising an eyebrow, trying to hide her curiosity with a light-hearted tone. "Yeah," his smile grew. "My grandmother used to grow them in her garden. I always thought they were the prettiest things. Soft, simple, but they still stand out." Claire smiled, feeling something shift within her. The simple words felt like an invitation to breathe, to be seen. "I guess I can't argue with that," she said, holding up the flowers. "I'm Claire." "Jack," he replied, stepping closer. "It's nice to meet you, Claire, too." They ended up talking for the better part of an hour, walking from stall to stall, sharing stories about their lives, their tastes in food, their love of local art. Jack was an artist, a painter. He had moved back to the city a few months ago after a few years of traveling. Claire had learned to enjoy the quiet of her own life, but she wasn't closed off anymore. She had learned that even after all the heartbreak, there was still room for connection. She didn't need someone to fix her. She didn't need a savior. But she could allow herself to experience the warmth of someone new, even if it was just for a moment. Jack didn't rush her. There were no hints of desperation in his tone. He was genuine, interested, but not forceful. He let her take the lead when it came to what she wanted to share. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt safe in the vulnerability of another person. 3. At the end of the morning, as the market began to pack up and the crowds thinned, Claire found herself reluctant to say goodbye. But she knew she had to. Well, this was unexpected, she said with a soft laugh. It was, Jack agreed, glancing around as the vendors began cleaning up. I'm glad I ran into you. She felt her pulse quicken at the way he looked at her. Not with expectation, but with something quieter. Something more real. Do you want to grab coffee sometime? Jack asked, as if he had considered the question for a while but wasn't sure how it would land. Claire paused, her heart beating in her chest. The old part of her, the part still scarred by betrayal, wanted to hold back, to protect herself. But the new part of her, the woman who had learned how to heal and grow, knew this wasn't something to run from. Yeah, she said, smiling, feeling a weight lift. I think I'd like that. Jack smiled, pulling his phone out of his jacket pocket and offering it to her. She took it, typing her number into his contacts. You'll hear from me soon, he said. I promise I'm better at making coffee than picking flowers. She chuckled, handing the phone back. You better be. As they parted ways, Claire's steps were lighter than when she had arrived. She wasn't sure where this would go. Maybe nowhere, maybe something more. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to rush into anything. This wasn't about filling a gap. It was about choosing to be present, to enjoy connection, and to trust that if it was meant to be, it would unfold in its own time. She wasn't the same woman who had walked away from Adam. She wasn't looking for someone to save her. She had already done that herself, but she was open to the possibility of something real, something slow and steady, something that wasn't defined by the ghosts of the past. A few days later, Jack texted, How about that coffee? It wasn't. A grand gesture. It was simple, just like the flowers. Claire smiled and replied, Sure, how about Thursday? And as she hit send, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't the start of anything dramatic. It wasn't even a promise, but it was enough. For the first time, it felt like the future was full of choices, not regrets. End of scene. Reflections. On this moment. Claire is ready for connection, but it's not about finding someone to fill a void. It's about opening herself to authenticity without rushing into anything. Jack is a subtle yet significant presence, someone who meets her at her level, not forcing anything but letting things unfold naturally. The growth Claire has gone through is evident. She no longer feels bound by the past, and she's able to move forward with her eyes open, choosing to embrace new experiences without fear. It had been 2 weeks since Claire and Jack's first coffee, and they had met up a few times since, always with no pressure, just the simplicity of getting to know each other. They'd talked about their favorite books, the places they dreamed of visiting, the mundane things that filled their days. Jack was refreshingly open. He'd shared that he'd grown up in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business, and he'd escaped to the city to find more space, more anonymity. Claire shared her own story, carefully choosing which parts to reveal. She had told him about Adam, but only in passing. She had shared the truth of the divorce, but not the raw emotions. It wasn't that she was hiding it. She just didn't need to lead with it anymore. She wasn't defined by what had happened. Not anymore. It felt different with Jack. He didn't ask her to relive the pain. He simply listened, and that was enough. One Friday night, after they'd grabbed dinner at a local Italian restaurant, Jack offered to walk Claire home. It was late, but the city was still awake, lights reflecting off the pavement, a steady hum in the background. You know, Jack said, casually draping his arm over her shoulders as they strolled down the quiet street. I didn't expect to meet someone like you. I wasn't even looking for anything like this. Claire smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. I wasn't either, she admitted. I think I just needed to be okay on my own first. I get that, he said, his tone softening. It's not easy, learning to be okay alone, but you seem like you figured it out. She paused for a moment, her heart fluttering in her chest. It felt nice to hear that, to know that in his eyes she was whole. I'm still figuring it out, she said honestly, feeling the truth of her words. But I think that's the point. You just keep moving forward. Jack stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her. His expression was serious, but there was something warm and unspoken between them. I don't want to rush you, Claire, he said, his eyes meeting hers. I'm not asking for anything more than what we have. I just want you to know that I'm here, whenever you're ready. It was the simplest thing, but it landed deeply. Claire felt a shift in herself, a quiet recognition that this was different. She wasn't scared of him. She wasn't scared of getting hurt. She wasn't looking for him to fill a hole, but rather to build something with her. I think I'm ready for that, Claire said, her voice steady but soft. I think I'm ready for this. They spent the next few weeks seeing each other more regularly, dinners, late-night walks, and shared experiences. With Jack, Claire didn't feel like she had to explain herself. He took her at face value, and his presence felt like an extension of the calm she had found within herself. But every now and then, memories of the past would bubble to the surface. She would catch herself, for a split second, wondering if she could truly trust again, if she could let herself fall, without fear. One evening, while they were sitting at a rooftop bar, Claire's gaze wandered across the skyline, her mind briefly drifting to thoughts of Adam. Do you ever think about the past? She asked, her voice soft but steady. Jack didn't hesitate. All the time, he said, but I try not to let it take over. I think you learn to carry it with you, but you don't let it shape everything. Claire turned to face him, the words weighing on her more than she expected. I try to do the same, but sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it feels like you're carrying too much. Jack reached for her hand, his touch grounding. I get it. But you're not alone in this, Claire. You don't have to carry it by yourself anymore. Her heart stilled at the sincerity in his voice. As the months passed, Claire felt herself opening more. Jack wasn't trying to fix her, wasn't trying to make her forget her past. He simply accepted it, accepted her. But it was clear that there were moments when she would still pull back. Moments when she would hesitate to let herself lean too heavily into the relationship. He noticed it, and he gave her space without making it feel like a test. I'm not going anywhere, Claire, Jack would say when the silence stretched just a little too long. Take your time. She had to admit, she liked that about him. He wasn't demanding anything from her. He wasn't holding on to a timeline. He wasn't trying to prove that he was different. He just was. And that was enough. One evening, as the weather began to warm and spring's first blooms filled the streets, Claire found herself standing in front of Jack's apartment, her heart thrumming in her chest. She was nervous, but it wasn't a bad kind of nervous. It was the kind that came from anticipation, from stepping into something new but without rushing it. Jack had invited her over for dinner, a casual night in, no big expectations. She took a deep breath before ringing the bell. When he opened the door, the sight of him, his smile, his easy presence, made her feel, for the first time in a long while, like she had found something good. Something real. Hey, Jack said, stepping aside to let her in. I was just finishing up the pasta. Claire smiled, taking in the familiar smell of garlic and herbs. It smells amazing, he grinned. Well, it should. I've been practicing. They shared an easy laugh as she walked into the kitchen, and for the first time, Claire felt herself relax fully into the moment. There were no questions about the past, no expectations about the future. There was only now. Dinner was delicious. The evening flowed effortlessly, full of laughter, stories, and soft glances that said more than words could. Afterward, they sat on the couch, the city lights twinkling outside the window, a quiet soundtrack to their conversation. As the night stretched on, Claire felt a warmth settle inside her. "I don't know what's going to happen between us," she said quietly, her hand resting against Jack's. Jack's fingers threaded with hers. "I don't either," he said, his voice calm. "But that's okay. We don't have to have it all figured out." Claire looked at him, his sincerity washing over her like a wave. She wasn't afraid anymore, not of what they could become or what they had already built. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for connection. And here, in this moment, with Jack, she felt exactly that. And for the first time in a long time, she knew it was enough. End of scene. Reflections. Claire is evolving, learning to trust herself and her ability to connect with someone in a healthy, balanced way. Jack continues to be a steady, patient presence. He's not trying to fix Claire, but is there to support her growth and give her the space she needs. The relationship is slow and gentle, built on mutual respect, understanding, and the willingness to navigate imperfections without rushing. The spring had given way to summer, and Claire's life had found a steady rhythm. Her time with Jack was simple, but fulfilling. They were both busy with work, but they carved out pockets of time for each other. Coffee dates turned into long walks, movie nights became a regular thing. And with every shared moment, Claire felt herself becoming more comfortable with the quiet stability of their relationship. But there was still a part of her that was hesitant, still lingering in the shadows of her past, the echoes of betrayal, the remnants of Adam's lies. They hadn't completely faded. Claire had come to terms with it, yes, but there was a difference between understanding something intellectually and truly freeing yourself from it emotionally. One evening, as they walked through the park near Jack's apartment, Claire felt the familiar flicker of doubt. She wasn't sure what triggered it. Maybe it was the way the golden hour light hit Jack's face, or the casual way they held hands, like they'd known each other forever. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met at a different time?" Claire asked, her voice quiet but steady. Jack glanced at her, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, her gaze ahead as they walked along the path. "I mean, if I hadn't been through all that with Adam, if I didn't still have these scars, you know?" Jack's thumb gently brushed against her hand, a reassuring touch. "I don't think it would have mattered," he said simply. "I'm here now, and so are you." But Claire felt the weight of her words settle between them, like a space she couldn't ignore. "I'm here now, yes," she repeated, more to herself than to him. "But I still feel like a part of me is always waiting for something to go wrong. Like I'm not enough to make this work, or that I'm going to screw it up." Jack stopped walking, gently pulling her to face him. His gaze was steady, unflinching. "You don't have to be perfect, Claire. You just have to be real. I'm not asking for anything more than that, and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to carry the weight of your past with you, not with me." Her chest tightened at his words. They were exactly what she needed to hear, yet still the doubt lingered. She wasn't used to being told that she didn't have to prove herself. "I know," she whispered, "but sometimes I just wish it was easier to let go." A week later, the unease that had been building within Claire reached a tipping point. She had run into Adam, unexpectedly and in a place she hadn't expected. It was a small cafe she used to frequent with him, a little place tucked away on a corner. She had walked in to grab a coffee before work, and there he was, standing in line, looking almost the same, like he hadn't aged a day since their divorce. Her heart dropped into her stomach. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. It wasn't. The shock of seeing him that unsettled her. It was the way her mind instantly replayed everything she had been through with him. The lies, the manipulation, the sense of betrayal that had torn apart her trust. Adam hadn't noticed her yet. He was engrossed in his phone, but Claire's pulse quickened, her hand suddenly clammy. For a brief second, she considered turning around and walking out. But she didn't. Instead, she found herself frozen, staring at him as the past and present collided. And then he looked up, his eyes widening as he recognized her. "Claire," he said, his voice distant but tinged with something Claire couldn't quite place. Her throat tightened, but she kept her composure. "Hi, Adam." The words felt thick on her tongue, but she forced them out, surprised by the lack of anger she felt, the absence of rage even. There was a long pause, the silence stretching between them like an unwelcome guest. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said awkwardly. I thought you'd have moved on by now. I didn't know." "No," Claire cut him off gently. "I'm not the person I was when we ended, Adam. And I don't need you to explain anything." She held his gaze firmly, her voice calm but resolute. "You made your choices, and I made mine. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm also not looking back." Adam looked down, his expression unreadable. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I know I did, but I never meant it." Claire felt a brief pang, but only a brief one. She had heard these words so many times before. They meant nothing now. "I know," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But that's not enough anymore." She turned to leave, and Adam didn't try to stop her. As she walked out of the cafe, she felt something heavy lift from her shoulders. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about closure. It was about her taking back control. She wasn't waiting for him to make things right anymore. She had already made them right for herself. The moment she arrived back at her apartment, Claire took a long, deep breath, her chest tight with emotions she hadn't expected to resurface. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. To Jack. "I ran into Adam today. It was harder than I thought it would be. I'm okay, but it hit me harder than I thought." Jack's response came a few minutes later. "I'm here. I know it's not easy. Just take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Claire felt a warmth in her chest. She wasn't sure what the future held with Jack, but in that moment, she knew that she could count on him to be a steady presence, someone who didn't expect her to be perfect, someone who didn't need her to rush her healing. The following evening, Jack came over to her apartment. He was there when she opened the door, looking like he had been waiting all day to see her. They didn't immediately talk about what had happened. Instead, they sat down together on her couch, Jack pulling her into his arms. She rested her head on his shoulder, the weight of the day slipping off her. "I'm glad you told me," Jack said softly. Claire nodded, her fingers tracing the fabric of his shirt. "I didn't realize how much I was still carrying, but I think today, it was a turning point. I'm not looking back, Jack. Not anymore." His arms tightened around her, his voice steady. "You don't have to carry all of it, Claire. You don't have to carry anything you don't want to anymore." She closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. The space between them, the doubts, the fears, the wounds, didn't seem so vast anymore. With Jack, she felt like she was allowed to be whole. In the silence that followed, Claire realized that she didn't need Adam's apology or anyone's validation to feel like she was enough. She was enough on her own, and if Jack could walk beside her, then maybe, just maybe, she could learn to trust again. End of scene. Reflections. Claire confronts her past face to face with Adam, and while the encounter stirs old emotions, she chooses to let go of the anger and pain, solidifying her emotional growth. Jack's steady support plays a pivotal role in Claire's healing, showing how a healthy relationship can help rebuild trust without pressure. The moment with Adam serves as a turning point for Claire, where she fully lets go of the past and embraces the future with Jack, understanding that healing is a journey that can't be rushed.